Welcome to Wealth Coherence. I'm your host, Emily Bouchard, a social worker specializing in human development and fascinated by human potential. For over 20 years, I've been a coach to families with successful businesses and leaders with successful careers, and you may be surprised to learn that true wealth is about coherence. When our inner state of being aligns with how we live, give, lead, and love. In this series, we will explore an integrated model to flourish coherently, because wealth isn't what we have, it's who we are when we are fully aligned. Welcome to today's episode of Wealth Coherence, where we are getting a chance to dive into some really great topics around families and what is a family and how do we define families now and modern families in particular. And I need to share a little preamble about why I've invited Kim Kamin to join me, because it's a really special story that has to do with synchronicities. Those of you who know me know that I love synchronicities in life, and it's one of the things that lets you know that you're coherent. When you're totally aligned with who you are, your values, what matters to you, your purpose, and you move in the world from that place, even when hiccups happen, you get the right resources and the right support showing up at the right time. And Kim embodies that for me. So just quickly, I want to share that we met for real, like we've known each other professionally for years, but I sat down next to Kim at the Purposeful Planning Institute's Rendezvous Conference that happened last July in Denver. And we were at the keynote at the beginning of the first day, and we were so happy to meet each other in person. And Kim leaned in and she said, before it got started, I have such FOMO because I love the topic that you're going to be presenting on in terms of estate planning for modern families. And I wrote a chapter on it, and I so wish that I could have helped you to present it. And I looked at her and like my eyes got really big. And I was like, really? And then the keynote started, and it was a really great speaker. And at one point he said, ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And so I turned to Kim and I said, well, my co-presenter could not come because of a family emergency. And I'm in a position of presenting alone, and I don't have the legal perspective with me anymore, which is so important. Would you be willing to jump in and present with me in a couple of hours? Like it was going to be like, I don't know, 2 sessions after the keynote. It was immediate. And Kim, without hesitation, said, absolutely. She had her assistant get some slides to me right away. I saw that she'd written a chapter in the book. She'd been part of Lineberg. She has been talking about modern family estate planning and writing about it and researching it for years. And I'm so ecstatic to have her join us. And I have to finish by saying, when we got up and presented and we let the people in the room know that we had just decided to present together, one of the most common feedback we got at the end was people were blown away, and they had no idea that it was our first time presenting and that we had never planned on doing it because of how in sync we were. So this is a little snapshot of what life can be like. I mean, I was like, how am I going to present? And I just completely trusted, and Kim showed up in such a beautiful way. And there were over like 200 people in this room, and we just happened to sit next to each other and had this great conversation. So with that, I'd love to introduce Kim the way I really enjoy doing it on the show, which is to ask Kim to share something about herself and her work. And, she is an attorney. She's very busy in a thriving practice, and writer and speaker on topics related to estate planning. What would be something that we might not necessarily know about you by reading the show notes in the bio that we'll have for you?
Well, so yes, in my bio, you'll see I practiced law for many years as an estate planning attorney at a law firm that really focused on trust and estates. Years ago, I went in-house to be the chief wealth strategist for a multifamily office. And I also am an educator. I've been teaching at Northwestern Law School now for soon to be 25 years. And I teach at University of Chicago Business School too. So you'll see all of that. But the one thing I think I do want people to know about me is that family and individual thriving within family, and we know, as we'll be talking about more, that there are a lot of different kinds of families, is just something that is incredibly important to me. I happen to be very fortunate. I'm incredibly tight with my own family. and long-term friends who are like family. As we know, family are not only the people you're related to by blood or
Mhm.
by law, but also the people that you choose to love. And so we can be related to people by love as well. But at my core, I am a planner, and I know that when important decisions that impact families are made poorly, they can cause immeasurable pain
Mhm.
and heartache. And yet, when they are done well, they can lead to flourishing and fulfillment and well being. So, families are complicated and children can't pick their families. So, we, as people in my profession who are proactive estate planning professionals, have to focus on that. And I have spent the last 3 decades helping families think through what it is that gives their lives meaning, how to design their legacy to empower their family members, and design and administer trusts and philanthropic vehicles that both align with their values, but hopefully give all of the parties involved in the system room to grow and evolve over time.
Oh my God, the work you do is so important. And I hope anybody who's listening that is working with an estate planning attorney or is an estate planning attorney really hears what you're saying in terms of coming from that place of purpose and alignment with who their values and who they are, and taking into consideration all of the different stakeholders for sure. And we've used the word family a number of times, and we're both so passionate about families. Before we started the show, we were talking about the definition of family and what does it mean from a legal perspective. And would you be willing to share what you share with me? Because I think that it's so important for people to understand when they're talking with their attorney or if they're working with a family, like what's the context of family they're thinking?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mentioned to you that I'm working on a project right now where I'm really clearly defining family for different contexts. And I start out by looking just at the dictionary definition, which very closely defines a family based on, what you might think of as a nuclear family. It's a household of a couple who have children, and it also can be the extended family unit. The Ultra High Net Worth Institute has launched a Wealthosaurus to help define
Mhm.
things. And there they do expand the definition of family and say it's not only the nuclear family, but in modern families, it also does include some of the things we'll be talking about. Unmarried couples who consider themselves families, even though they may not legally be families, foster children or stepchildren who may not legally be descendants. It can include, as I mentioned, the people that we are not related to by blood or by law, but we're related to by love, odd children,
Mhm.
and informal. I'm an auntie to a number of my friends' children, and they think of me as their auntie, and I think of them as my nieces and nephews. And even though legally we are not related to each other, we are related because we are family. So the
Mhm.
family is the family that you are born into. The family is the family that legally you are related to, typically through marriage or adoption. And then family can be much broader than that. It's whoever you consider to be your family. But because the legal definitions or the definitions in trust don't always line up with the individual's definition of their own family, things can get quite complicated in trying to provide for the people that we love, and in the family office space, trying to provide services to the people who are loved.
Yeah, it's so true. I had a wonderful family I worked with, and they really hit up against this, where the father in this nuclear family was from a lineage of a very well, like household name family. And he was a recipient of dynasty trust structures that were created way before he existed, right? And he married a woman, fell in love, and she had four children. And then they had two of their own that they had biologically together. And as far as his trust was concerned, he only had two children. And the other four, who he had legally adopted and considered his children, would not be able to benefit from the resources the way his two that he had that were blood. And so we had a lot of conversations and worked with the family around fair versus equal, what he had say and what he didn't. And he really worked with his wealth strategists and attorneys in terms of, and tax professionals in terms of what was the maximum he could give during his lifetime to the four stepchildren that were adopted and became his children. And then he made sure that they were educated in terms of, when I die, this gift that I'm able to give to you will stop. It will not continue. Your sister and brother are going to get the estate. So what is it you need to do with this money so that it will maximize your potential in your lives as much as possible during my lifetime? Because I don't know how long I'm going to be here. And it was such a painful and powerful conversation to have. And then it really had everybody step up in terms of what do we need to know and understand about what to do with this money so that we can benefit the most from it and really show up the way that he was intending for us in terms of what he was giving to us. Have you seen other situations like that with the fair versus equal happening in terms of how somebody feels about their family versus how the legal system has designed it?
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons, you referenced the book earlier, that it was
Mhm.
really important to us to create a book that would help people start thinking through these issues. Because a lot of times clients, especially in your case where you just mentioned they actually had adopted the stepchildren, it would be unfathomable to them that the children who were their children were not treated as children under parents' documents or prior
Yeah.
documents that had been set up by ancestors for
Mhm.
them. And it's true, if you're looking at older documents, and we've seen this a lot, there can be discrimination against non-marital children. We've seen situations where people have to scramble to artificially get married to somebody just so that the child that they're having as a single parent by choice is born within a marital context so that that child can inherit from the family trusts. People
Mhm.
have to jump through crazy hoops. We do see oftentimes adoption can solve the problem of a stepchild or a foster child or someone who's
Mhm.
like a child not being treated as a family member. But if the existing family trusts have discriminated against them, there is a lot of planning and a lot of thought that needs to go into it. There are also in the future potentially going to be contests to some of these older trusts that they are in violation of public policy, because the law has evolved significantly when it comes to the treatment of non-marital children, the treatment of children who have been adopted from the rules as they existed in the 90s and 50s and 60s. And so it is possible that these types of, and there's even a case that where someone was trying to discriminate against future descendants who had been adopted, and the court invalidated it. It was too broad, and they deemed that it would be against public policy. So there can be some glimmers of hope for families who find themselves in their situations, that they could even find friendly judges who would be willing to help with this. But we see that in the family office context, because family offices can take care of stepchildren and certainly children who have been adopted, and trying to figure out how to create new trust, decant trust,
Mhm.
exercise powers of appointment, all of the tools that we have in our toolbox to try to modify old trusts or contest old trusts or deal with those types of disparities.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's one of the things I like what you said earlier in terms of our family can be like family of affinity, people we love. And the way that the laws work, you can give gifts to whoever you want to during your lifetime. And you have a certain amount you can give over time, but then there's also a certain amount you can give each year.
If you want to be technical, so there's a unified lifetime and estate exemption, which currently is set at $15 million per person, which is pretty high. So any individual can give up to $15 million during their life or at death to anybody that they want to. Or in addition to that, it does not count against the lifetime exemption or test
Mhm.
or estate exemption.
Mhm.
They can give what's now $19,000
Per
every
person.
year to anybody that they want
When they
to.
want to. Yeah, it's I think that that's such a great way to acknowledge those relationships of affinity and to design your life the way that's in keeping with your values.
In addition to that exemption and those annual exclusion gifts, they also can pay unlimited direct tuition and healthcare expenses. So that is another very powerful way that you can benefit the people that you care about, who you are trying to transfer or assets to or benefit in some way.
Yeah, so when you pay directly to the school or to the healthcare provider, that that's not considered a gift or goes against either of those things. Yeah, that's a really good example. And I love the notion of being really upfront and transparent and sharing your thinking about this. Because while I worked with that one dad that was so upfront with his kids, there's other situations where people might know of this happening and that there's going to be that, but they don't feel comfortable talking about it, or because they're worried about upsetting people or having it not go well, or they have people find out when they die. And that causes such strife in families. And wondering, with the work that you do, how do you support people in talking about their estate plans while they're formulating it, or before it's been signed or after they've made the decision? Like, what do you recommend or how do you approach it?
Thank you for asking. It can be challenging when you are practicing law as an attorney, especially if you're being paid by the hour, because a lot of times clients are not quite as forthcoming. You can ask them who are the members of your family, but it's very common for them not to explain, this is my child, but this child is a result of surrogacy and it
Mhm.
wasn't really my genetic material, or this is my child, but this child was adopted. And so they might not always be as forthcoming about how they are related to some of these family members that you just see that as an estate planning attorney and assume that they're your children and define them as
Mhm.
children and then move forward with that. For those of us who are not on the billable hour, and in my role as a wealth strategist, we really can get under the hood and know our families so well in a family office context to spend the time to have those difficult conversations, to really understand how all of the family members fit together, how they came to assemble this family. And as you referenced many times, it's a blended family. So some of the children were born within marriage and some of the children were not. And some of the children are legally yours and some of them are not. And it really can be very complicated, but to take the time to really understand the family tree and understand how everyone's related and forecast for the clients the types of issues and the types of problems and the type of
Mhm.
conflict that could happen after death.
Mhm.
It's not a one and done conversation, and it can be very overwhelming. Most people don't want to think about morbid
Yeah.
things like the fact that we are all mortal and that our time on this planet is very, very limited. And a lot of people also don't have time to really do the self-reflection about what they want their legacy to be and how they want to make people feel and what the purpose of their wealth is to benefit various people that they love or have obligations to. Sometimes these family relationships can be very strained. One of the things I've been doing work on lately and research on is
Mhm.
family estrangement and
Estrangement.
disinheritance, which is on the rise, both of those. So again, there's a lot to unpack here with
Mhm.
every family. And so I guess my advice would be that if you have the luxury of time to develop very deep and meaningful relationships with your clients to help them walk through
Mhm.
these, and if you are a professional in some capacity in this industry without the personal training or bandwidth to be doing this yourself, bring in somebody who can help you
Mhm.
and help your families think through these really fraught but incredibly important
Mhm.
issues.
Yeah, I'm thinking about one wealth strategist that was working with a blended family situation where the couple was at such an impasse because of different values related to how they should treat the yours, mine, and ours scenario of the kids, that they wouldn't sign the estate planning documents. And it was like, wait, we've done everything they've asked. They need other additional help. So they referred to me and I did like maybe 3 months of money coaching for them and then help them facilitate a really important conversation with all of their adult children, the whole mix. And it made such a difference for them in terms of the understanding of what the thinking was around why they approached the estate plan the way they did. It was quite unique and convoluted how they came about their decision that made sense for them with their perspectives, and giving them a chance to actually add visuals, and they showed it and they talked about it. And we did it before they signed on the dotted line so that these adult children had input and they knew that it was the parents had final say. But oh my gosh, I got a text from that mom 10 years later thanking me. And she said, my husband just passed away 6 months ago, and this process would be a total nightmare if we hadn't had that conversation. It's like it was just this moment for them. They didn't know when it was going to happen, but they knew at some point it was. And she was just so grateful that they'd taken that time to do that. So I think you're right on in terms of there's the legal side and then there's the emotional relational side. And there's so many fears that keep people from wanting to think about or talk about their estate plan. And the more we can help people address those, the better it is for the whole family and their relationships.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
a big proponent of encouraging people. Like it's like carrying an umbrella on a sunny day. Once you've thought through all of these things, nothing terrible is going to happen in the near future. Just get something down on paper and then tinker with it and then
Mhm.
think about how you feel and revisit it. And yes,
Yeah.
these things are unpleasant, but they're just so incredibly important. It's devastating when anyone loses somebody that they love,
Yeah.
to be left a mess or something that wasn't well thought out or something that's going to cause friction among the remaining children or surviving family members is it's such a gift to your family to invest a little bit of time and energy to address that. And it makes everybody sleep better at night.
Yeah. And having that context for why these decisions were made the way they were makes a huge difference. And, you touched on estrangement, and I think we need to dive into that a little bit because it is rife right now. I have 3 clients that are all dealing with it on different levels, and it's heartbreaking. And this sense of this is the only recourse or the only solution that I have. And the cost that can happen for those involved is so pervasive within the family system. And it's not just financial. What are you discovering in your research, or what are you seeing that's important for families to know and understand about it?
Yeah, so these are early days on that project. I'm focusing on disinheritance first. Estrangement is a piece of that because I was pretty shocked to find that I think it was 23% of adults in our country are estranged from one or both parents or significantly estranged from siblings. And in our industry, there's so much discussion about cohesion and keeping the family together and family decision making and family governance. And I always put all of my views and biases on the table. I've always been a little bit skeptical of that because I do feel like when people are not given the choice to make their own decisions and live their own dreams, that it can be incredibly problematic. And to force siblings or cousins to run a business together, donate together, or invest together can be really challenging, even under the very best of family relationships. But, there are a lot of unhealthy and toxic relationships out there. I do think that people going through therapy and doing self-work and trying to figure out what is causing them pain in their lives sometimes does point to families. And I do think we're living in really divided times right now. Families are splitting up over religious arguments. Families are splitting up over political arguments. Family are splitting up over business decisions and trying to invest together, donate together, and not agreeing on the paths, or just not agreeing with what other people in the family have envisioned for how they're going to spend their lives. Everyone only has unless you're of the belief system that everyone gets to come back and do this again. But many belief systems do not believe that we get multiple options to live our lives. Most people think, this is kind of a you only live once and our lives are very short. If you're of the belief system that this is kind of it, and everyone wants to maximize their own personal experience and their own personal flourishing, to have family members trying to control you with money or trying to direct how you live your life and how you spend your time, particularly if those are then family members that you really have very different value systems from, or you're really disagreeing with, or spending time together is really unpleasant, or there's mental health or addiction issues within the family, or, let's be realistic, there's abuse within the family, either physical or mental. When people are in those types of toxic situations, the healthiest thing they can do is to disengage.
Yeah, it's such an interesting time. And I think the other thing that I've noticed in recent years is the lack of ability to handle, maintain, and communicate around difficult topics, right? So that there's a quick default to, we can't talk about that. And I liken it to in families when it's like having an invisible fence, when you have a dog that has that collar, and if they get too close to where the system is, they'll get a shock, but there's no actual physical fence. And when I'm interviewing family members, I always find the invisible fences when I talk to the in-laws, because they weren't part of the system where it was obvious where they were, and they hit up against it, like, wait, what just happened? It's like, oh no, you can't go there in the family. And there's this tendency to have it be like, to stay comfortable and have kind of what Patrick Lencioni calls artificial harmony. You become more limited in what you can talk about and how you can move with each other. And what I like to do is look at, how do you turn down the voltage on that fence? So it's like, a reminder, like, this is going to be a difficult topic, but we have the skill to do that, right? Like, you can build skills to have difficult conversations. And I come to believe it has a lot to do with trust. And I've been doing a lot of research around trust. I'm writing a book on trust and money in families that's coming out in November. Everything that you just talked about, if there's a breakdown in trust in some way in the family system, and if you can get to the core of that and really shore up that foundational piece of trust, you can work through a lot of issues and have significant different opinions and different conflicting values even. But if you find common ground and if you find ways of looking at like shared humanity, there can be ways of overcoming that. And it sounds like from what you're researching, this disinheritance thing is like it could be a threat or a way to try and like give a consequence because of a behavior that you're not liking. What would drive somebody to think that this is the best option I can do?
There are a lot of reasons why this is coming up. Some of it is control, some of it is a threat. Some of it is very temporary. Some of it is not well thought through because you haven't thought about how that will impact the
The
siblings,
reaction,
their
yeah.
potential relationships with each other. Sometimes it's trying to reward certain children who've been, the good children and punishing the children, or maybe not even punishing them. Just it's purely a reward. It depends how many resources there are, what those resources are, and how people interact with them. Sometimes it's just rejection that there are children who are simply rejecting the family value system, rejecting the family money, rejecting the concept that they could be controlled by it, and sometimes there's mental health and addiction components. So there's a lot there, and I would be delighted to dive into that with you at a later date.
Well, yeah, we'll have to revisit it once your article's out. That's really great that you're doing that. I love your thought leadership in this space and how you're educating people on the professionals that are in the space and the families that need this help. And would you share a little bit about how the chapter around modern families came about and what you discovered in your research that would be really helpful for people to know? Because in our presentation, we talked about modern families, we talked about blended families, we talked about relationships with same-sex couples, whether they're married or not. And then we also talked about a growing trend of polyamory and having multiple partners and multiple relationships that are very loving. So let's start with the origin story of how you came to write this chapter in this book.
So yeah, and just to back up, it isn't just a chapter. I got to know
Oh
Steve
my gosh.
Lineberg. Yeah, so I got to know Steve Lineberg, who is a true legend in our industry, the late Steve Lineberg, whom we all miss very much. I actually met Steve a number of years ago at a speakers dinner at a conference that we were both presenting at. It actually was a PPI conference where my topic was the ethical trustee. But we ended up having a really long and deep conversation at this speakers dinner and talking about some of the other work that I was doing at the time. I was spending a lot of time researching and speaking about planning for the 50% and how to do estate planning for divorce and blended families. I was talking a lot about planning for unmarried couples and same-sex couples, which was an area for me at the time. Same-sex marriage was not legal yet in our country. And so the planning for unmarried couples and same-sex couples was essentially synonymous. I was also doing a lot of speaking about assisted reproductive technologies, and I was just very interested in other similar topics. So his brain started working, and we agreed that we wanted to collaborate on some kinds of projects. He invited me to start writing for Lissy, which is the listserv that he did. I mean, Steve really contributed so much to our industry. One of the things that he contributed was his Tools and Techniques series in the Lineberg Library. And we ended up having a meeting shortly after our conversation at Heckerling, which is for estate planners, the biggest estate planning conference that we have each year in Orlando. And we were meeting, and he said, he did have a book on estate planning for modern families, a Tools and Techniques book. And he asked, Kim, if I put you in charge of this book, what would you want to do with it? And so I thought for a few minutes and said, I think what I'd want to do is start with a chapter on estate planning for all modern families and laying out the basics of core planning and flexible planning and what every single family should think about, regardless of what the family looks like. And then what I'd want to do is dive into a separate chapter for all of the different issues that advisors working with modern families face and that families themselves face. I would want this to be a book that is helpful and practical for professionals in the space, whether they're attorneys or accountants or consultants or other types of advisors, insurance professionals, something that anyone who's working with families in this space and thinking about estate planning should know about. But right now, there's no way to find all of these things in one place. You've got a family where they're going through surrogacy and you have to do research here. You've got a family with non-marital children and you have to do research there. So I thought it would be really helpful to have a chapter on divorce, a chapter chapter on blended families, a chapter on going solo, people who, when you're planning for people who are not married, some of them with children, some without. So I just made a list of all the different things that I thought would be helpful for defining marital status and life partners, define issues of defining descendants, adoption, non-marital children, and other related issues, either because of technology or just changes. So special needs planning, planning for multinational couples, planning for increase, the technological developments that were leading to longer lifespans. And so more diminishing capacity. And anyway, so I came up with this and he loved it. He thought it was a great idea, something that would be so beneficial for both practitioners and families alike in the field. And got me started. We agreed that Wendy Goff, I wanted a partner to help me with this, and we agreed that Wendy Goff, who many of you will know is really also a leading thinker in this area, would be the perfect partner for me. And so Wendy and I got started in starting to assemble the book and draft chapters, but also bring in contributing authors with areas of expertise. So we brought in professors who had done work on non-marital children, and professors who had done work on assisted reproductive technologies, and professors who had done work on same-sex couples, because we really wanted to bring in some of the best thinkers in the country and then work very, very closely with them on what we thought these chapters should look like, to be comprehensive, to be very practical, very down to earth, and very accessible.
That's so phenomenal and so comprehensive. What a feat you did, and great resource for this whole legal community. And I would love to focus a little bit on the chapter on polyamorous couples, because it's such an interesting topic. And there's TV shows that highlight, like, Big Love was really successful for a while, but there's so much to it, and it's actually a real thing. Yeah, did you have to like convince him to put that chapter in the book,
Well,
or what?
that's the story as well. So the first edition of our book came out in 2017 that we did together, and then of course I started getting invited to run around the country and talk to people about this book. And one day I was having a conversation with a group of family office executives about the book and modern families and the issues they were dealing with and some of my advice for how they could handle things. And one of the executives raised their hand and said, "So what is your advice about planning for polygamous families?" Which took me aback. We didn't have a chapter in our book about planning for polygamous families. It was not something, I'm from the Midwest. I was wondering, well, maybe, and you mentioned Big Love. That was a really big TV show at the time on HBO. Through our conversation, it became clear that's not what he was talking about at all. He was talking about a Warren Buffett situation, where when you have very wealthy families and they get along with their spouse, there's no need to divorce, even if they are not living together at the time. So this wasn't even about forming a throuple and living together with your spouse and your girlfriend. This was about the types of relationships where there's no reason for the family to divorce, but there is a new person who is in a romantic and committed relationship with one of the two members of the couple. And that they are all very close. For those of you who've ever looked up, Warren Buffett and his wife and his girlfriend would do Christmas cards together, and they would speak together at presentations, and it was very open that this was the relationship. So that's what they were talking about. So for the next edition of our book that was coming out in 2019, of course, I had to add a chapter on planning for polyamory, which is really what they meant. They didn't mean polygamy. Yeah. Polygamy is actually, even though it's been decriminalized in Utah, is still illegal in our country. But as you've pointed out, it's a growing trend, not only in ultra high net worth families where people choose to bring a third into the family office and into the family, but also it's incredibly common. And Wendy, my co-author and co-editor, was seeing a lot more of that because she's in Seattle. I'm in the Midwest. I'm very sheltered. But she was seeing a lot more of that where either they were thruples. You live on the West Coast, and we do see it being normalized in the media. I think there was a show, You, Me, and Her.
Yeah.
It came out, that was a long time ago, about a couple forming a throuple. And we've seen it in The Politician. My friend Joel Stein had it in his American Princess. We've seen it in Hacks. We've seen it in Good Trouble. There is a lot of this that is being shown in the media. And so I thought it was very important to add that as a chapter to the book, because when you are married to one person, but you have, and this is not just about open marriage, this is about people who truly have someone else who is living in their home and helping raise their children, and the three of them go everywhere together. Or
Mhm.
sometimes it's two couples who are entwined and are raising children together. And what that means from an estate planning perspective is that you have to think about how to provide for everybody when you don't have a marital deduction for the unmarried. It's a blend of planning for unmarried couples and planning for a traditional nuclear family in some ways. But
And
there's a lot to think about there.
and the decision making too, right? Like if one of the throuple has a medical emergency and somebody has to make decisions on their behalf, and there's a legal default to the legal spouse, but maybe they're with the other partner that is equally involved. If you don't take the time to write out your medical directives and name both those people as either one can make those decisions, or like, do you have that capacity to do that?
That can be
Yep.
difficult, because you normally want to just name one agent, because what if the doctors are instructed by two different people to do two different things? But what
Mhm.
we can do is, especially if it's out in the open, is you can have a medical power where you name perhaps the spouse, or you could name the non-married person, but then you can include directions for the two of them to do joint decision making before instructing the doctor. You could name one as primary, one as secondary. So I do have a lot of specific advice about those kinds of issues.
Mhm.
Where it does get more complicated is where people want to use the exemption for their children. So we do try to rely a lot on life insurance planning. And again, theoretically, and I ended up getting pretty involved in this community and starting to get phone calls from people all over the country. The other interesting chapter we added for that edition was on cryonics, because I was getting more and more questions about people who wanted to be
Oh.
frozen and creating zombie trusts for what happens if, in fact, the technology ever were to get to a place where people could be revived, or it was legal for them to be cloned. How is their money available for them? So in that second edition, we added 4 more chapters. And then in the
Oh.
most recent edition, we added 4 more chapters that came up during the pandemic. We added chapters for planning for religious diversity within families, racial diversity in families. We added a chapter on planning for mental health and addiction in families. And then we added a chapter on general ethics within serving families.
That is fantastic. And I'm thinking in your next edition, you're going to have to add a chapter on like robotic twins. Like they're developing these robots that have like the likeness of the person and the speech of the person and their AI generated agent within them. It's like, does that entity have rights? Like to keep it in functioning? Like it's just quite something where
Yeah.
where
Well,
we're moving
and right
to.
now that would probably, we do have a section on pet trusts and purpose trusts for non-human beneficiaries. There are options there as well.
That robot would fall in the non-human category. That's
That would be
great.
a non-human beneficiary for sure. Whether the law has expanded to include that as a pet or not, might not quite make it. But yes, the law, it will continue to evolve because it can
It
be
will
expensive
totally
to
evolve.
maintain it can be expensive to maintain your robot twin.
Yeah, yeah, and the updates and the upgrades, yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh, this is so fascinating. So as we're getting ready to close, I loved asking my guests to share about their experience of wealth coherence, like how you define it and how you've seen it play out in your life and in your professional life.
Absolutely. And by the way, I love that this podcast is called Wealth Coherence. I love the whole way that you are promoting for people to be thinking about this idea of wealth coherence. And I'm just so grateful to be here and
Thank
so
you.
inspired by all of the wonderful work that you're doing in this area. But it gave me an opportunity to reflect briefly on how I do define wealth and wealth coherence in my own life and in my professional life. And for me, wealth is broader than just thinking about financial wealth. It's health, it's family, it's meaningful interactions that make an impact on the lives of others. It's definitely having enough financial resources that one does not need to worry about the basics or about making tough choices and how they want to spend their life. And I was doing actually a little bit of back research, because I remembered from years ago, back in 2010, that there had been research done about how wealth does not increase happiness. And as someone with a psychology background, that's something that's always been very important to me, for people to understand that, yes, you need enough financial resources to be comfortable. And there have been some updates to that. In 21, there was a UPenn study. And then in 2023, there was additional work. So it was interesting for me to look into that. But I have always been a strong proponent that financial well-being is such a small part of someone's wealth and well-being. And it may be good for happiness to have sufficient assets. There is research that shows when you want money too much, or you focus purely on the financial side of things, that it actually can be toxic to one's well-being and one's happiness. So that is another area of great interest to me. And personally, that aligns with my view of wealth. And then coherence for me is authenticity. It's living logically in consistency to the connection between all of my parts. For most of us, there is going to be some level of compartmentalization by necessity. And I do that too in terms of my focus. But I do try personally to show up with my full authentic self. And that's a value of mine. I tend to be very direct. Everyone who knows me knows I have no poker face. Whatever I'm thinking, you will see. My husband, who I've been with since I was very, very young, and we've been blessed to have a very good relationship, says that I have no hangups. I keep everybody else's secrets. I'm a vault, and I will, if you tell me something in confidence, Emily, no one will ever know about it. But I don't have a lot of my own secrets. I'm pretty much, what you see is what you get. And I'm very open about my views, my experiences. And for me, that helps me to live in coherence, because I value integrity. I value hard work. I value kindness. I value helpfulness. If I ever see myself or experience even thinking unkind thoughts, like, I feel worse about myself. I'm not living coherently with my value system to be thinking negative and unkind thoughts. I mean, that doesn't mean that I'm not frustrated with myself and others when things could be better, because we're always striving to be better and to make things better and for our work product to be the best it can be. But I am proud of myself for being dependable, for being stable. I feel my best when I'm helping people and being productive and moving things forward. And generally, for me, I feel most coherent when I am putting out positive energy, having connections such as our connection, and trying to experience and promote peace and self-satisfaction. So long-winded answer, but I did give it a little bit of thought.
That's so great. I love it. It is such a personal experience, right? And people define it how it really resonates for them. And I love that you bring that to your personal and your professional life. And I certainly experience that. And it's wonderful to get to share some of your wisdom with a broader community. And thank you so much for joining me. And hopefully you can come back again after you've published your research on estrangement. I think that'll be a really important follow-up.
I would welcome that. And congratulations to you on the book. Thank you so much. I know it took a while, but I'm just really delighted that we could be here together, and look forward to many more conversations. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Wealth Coherence. If it resonated, I'd love for you to share it or leave a review. This will help others find their way to this space. And if you're ready to keep exploring what it means to live, lead, and give from a place of coherence, head to emilybouchard.com to stay connected. Until next time, be well internally and allow your external life to be the fullest expression of who you truly are.